fans, welcome back to Room 237, and this is going to be not really an unboxing, but showing what this release comes with, somewhat of a review. I haven't reviewed too many documentaries. I don't really like, well, it's not that I don't like to, I love talking about documentaries, but reviewing them is kind of strange because after a while, it's just repeating the information that you'll find on the documentary. But, so this is for the 2020 sequel to 2019's In Search of Darkness, which I have reviewed this. I loved this documentary absolutely to death. It was so much fun. As a horror fan, I still don't know if there's any kind of actual wide release outside of it showing on Shudder, but 4.5 hours, and I actually didn't know there was going to be any kind of continuation for it. And then it was, I think it was sometime late September, early October of last year, this was announced. And I might have mentioned this around that time, telling people, hey, you know, if you liked this or missed out on this, definitely go over to Kickstarter or 80shorrordoc.com or whichever one I got this off of, and definitely pick this up. Because I know, like, for 10 extra bucks, you could also get a physical copy. And if you're wondering what's rattling around, it's just the little tag for the pin that I kept in here. So I guess before I get into my opinion of this as a documentary, I'll just show what it comes with. Because I know there was a lot of complaints about this. I myself did not have any. I know there was like a recall because of some of the production on it. Mine wasn't one. I got mine very late, but I had no flaws with it. I know there was complaints about a slipcase, no irreversible cover. I really don't care about any of that. Plus, I love this cover. Of all the different covers there were, this one is my favorite. But with this, it's, I guess, to make those people happy. It does have a slipcase, which is cool. I love how it has that cover. It's the perfect sequel cover to that. But it does have, the reversible cover, something like a 16-page booklet on the documentary, which is cool. I never complain about getting more stuff. So yeah, even just the physical presentation of this is definitely stepped up. It did also come with the enamel pin, which unfortunately I had the pin for this one. I had it on the backpack that I bring to work. Must have lost it, so I'm not putting this on my backpack. I might put it on my bulletin board or something. Instead of a postcard of an alternate cover, it came with a postcard of In Search of Tomorrow, which is going to be, I believe it's getting released this summer, June or July. But it's the same kind of documentary, but on 80s sci-fi. I'm not the biggest sci-fi guy. I'm not sure if I'll drop the $80 to get this, because it might just have the same crossover films like John Carpenter's The Thing, maybe Reanimator. But I'm not the biggest sci-fi fan. But I will encourage people to purchase this if they are a sci-fi fan, because if it is any, if it has the same amount of attention and production and in-depth value as these two, And if you're even a casual sci-fi fan, it'll be worth to pick up. I will say that is a pretty cool cover. And this came with 3 posters because I just got the regular standard Blu-ray. I know there was like 3 or 4 different special editions for this. Like there was the Corey Taylor, Elvira. I don't know if there was a Cinemassacre one of this. There was 3 or 4. With this, there was like 12. And if you got one of those special editions, you got the 3 posters plus the poster of that. If I was to get the special edition, I might have got either the Cinemassacre one, maybe Corey Taylor. If there was like a Jeffrey Combs, Herbert West one, I definitely would have got that. Or like an Ash one, which is why I wore my Evil Dead 2 shirt for this. Shining is my favorite movie ever, but when I think of 80s, like my favorite 80s horror movie is Evil Dead 2. So the posters, which again has great artwork. I have this came with one, and it was the poster of this, and I have it hanging right there. So the one that I'll hang after I get a frame for it, the one that I'll hang next to it will be, you know, this one. I love the look of that. I love the giant 2 with all the characters in it. Then there's the alternate one. Which, the thing I love about this is like the tattered, beat to hell look around the edges. You know, kind of like a old VHS box. I love that. And then there's just this really fun looking one of people watching TV with all the posters and props from the 80s horror movies. I'll probably just stash those 2 somewhere or find somewhere else to hang them, but this is definitely the one that I'll be hanging next to my poster part 1. So how about the documentary itself? I will say, again, like 4.5 hours. It never gets boring. It never lags. It's constantly keeping you sucked in. It does have sort of the same presentation where it's like the wall of posters and it zooms in on the one they're talking about. Starts with 1980, goes all the way up. Talks about films of that year. Some of it does look like the same interviews from this, which is totally fine. I mean, that just shows that they got a lot of material for this. So, I mean, some people might call that lazy. I don't. But you can also tell there's new interviews, even for the same people. I mean, we get appearances from Robert Englund, Barbara Crampton, Nancy Allen, Heather Langenkamp, Tom Savini, directors like Joe Dante, Sean S. Cunningham, and there's actually more interviews with more YouTube type people, because I know during the production of this there was going to be watch parties and people were going to be able to watch these movies with more YouTube personalities and the actual people being interviewed on here. So you have more interviews with guys like James Rolfe from Cinemassacre, Good Bad Flicks, was it Brandon's Cult Reviews or something like that? So you have more YouTube personalities like horror fans, which I thought was really cool. Along with this one, where every couple of years they will do like a different aspect of 80s. Like there'll be a segment on the final girl, or the special effects, or the experience of the video store, or the video nasty. This one continues that. like it talks about horror video games of the 80s. One thing I did notice on this was, and this isn't a complaint about this at all, because I thought this was a great, excellent, this is probably my favorite documentary. This one, like, this is like the Godfather 2 of horror documentaries. And I know that's a bold statement, but it's true. And what I mean by not a complaint is this one is a lot of obvious choices, like mainstream films, very go-to 80s horror films. There are some deep cuts on this. But I remember watching this and I was like, wow, they didn't talk about Pieces or Silent Night, Deadly Night, or like there was a couple where I was like, I can't believe they didn't talk about like that particular film. This one they do. They don't only talk about Pieces, Silent Night, Deadly Night, The Entity, or some other great cult films. I mean, they go obscure. I mean, there's even films I haven't seen. Which, with this, there was a couple, but where it was more the mainstream ones, there's probably 4 or 5 that I haven't seen, but I at least heard of. With this, there were films that I hadn't even heard of, like Night Beast, Razorback, The Being. But then there were other ones that I had heard of, but or haven't seen in years, like Blood Diner, or Humanoids, or The Stuff. Evil Speak, which I actually have reviewed, and actually Evil Speak, Clint Howard is on this cover. So like when I saw Clint Howard from Evil Speak, I was like, wow, they're going really obscure with this one. So huge props to that. It makes sense. This is the bigger, obvious choices. This one's going a bit more obscure, more culty. Foreign, I realized there really wasn't a lot of Italian pictures in this. With this one of the segments in between the years is a whole segment on Italian horror, which huge kudos to that. Big fan of Italian horror. And not just Italian horror, but it was all on giallo and Italian horror. And they incorporated those films into the years. So I'm glad that got its own article or segment. Only the years that the Italian films are on this are the American releases. So even though they do City of Living Dead, Beyond, and The Black Cat by Fulci, which I think all came out in 81. It's like 83 and 84 on this. They talk about Cannibal Holocaust, but in 1985 or 6, because that was when it was released over here. Which is fine, that's not a complaint. It's just very interesting because you learn. That's what a documentary should do. It should teach you things. So it was kind of cool to see, you know, like, oh, okay, so it came out at that time over here. But I was glad to see that Italian films and giallos, you know, got the credit that they deserve. Great interviews with like Corey Taylor, Chris Jericho, you know, people who really are horror fans. And it's just as interesting. It's just as fast-paced. The 4.5 hours goes by like that. I know that wasn't a loud stat. There, I guess that's better. Just constantly interesting. Each film, like some of them, okay, like Evil Speak, you might get like one person. Well, actually, it was the guy from Good Bad Flicks, and then Elvira came on to say like one little thing. So yeah, some movies get like short little, kind of like a synopsis, and then other movies will go more in depth. But it was good to see they all got talked about. This one is more about sequels also. Then we got Friday the 13th Part 2, Elm Street 2. We actually got Halloween 2. I know they talked about 5. I don't remember if they talked about 8 or not. And if you're thinking, wow, you're doing a review and you only watched it once and you don't remember, there's a lot of information in these. Another reason why these are totally worth the purchase is because it's a lot of constant information and it never gets boring. Another thing that I found was, another segment is we actually have some of the interviewees, because like where there's less segments in between the years than on this, we have segments where like there's one with Tom Savini, Nancy Allen, Robert Englund. I think there's one with Barbara Crampton. Yeah, there is. Where it's like Nancy Allen on Nancy Allen, Tom Savini on Tom Savini. And we have these long interrupted interviews where they just go through their careers. They talk about, like with Robert Englund, he talks more than just Elm Street. You know, he talks about V, he talks about Dead Married. Barbara Crampton talks about, you know, life after like Castle Freak, and Nancy Allen talks about the different directors she's worked with on different films. Tom Savini talks about his special effects school. So you get a more intimate stuff like that, which I think is, you know, very appreciated, and definitely, you know, it's really great to hear from people like that. I mean, like Tom Savini and Robert Englund, yeah, we've heard a lot from them, but they talk about more stuff. Like Tom Savini talks about his acting as opposed to just his special effects. But we get more intimate, in-depth interviews with like Nancy Allen and Barbara Crampton. Again, along with that great segment on Italian horror, 80s video games. Yeah, when they do the Italian films, they're placed in the year of the American release, which I thought was interesting. Because when I was first watching it, I was like, City of the Living Dead and the Black Cat came out in 81, not 83. But then when it showed the trailer, because they show trailers for all of them, it says like US release. Which I love the trailers of this. Actually, the guy from Good Bad Flicks, when they're talking about the Boogans, talks about like that deep voice and all the 80s trailers. Or it's either like, you know, be like, nothing can escape the Boogans. Or it's just like, Night Beast, terror from within. Or something over the top. Which is one reason why I love like Eli Roth's fake Thanksgiving trailer, just that voice, that low, deep, like 80s slasher trailer voice. And the trailers still have all the grit and the grain and the cracks in the film, which I love dearly. And that goes in with another thing that I saw was when Tom Savini is talking about his effects, he talks about the Kevin Bacon death with the spear. And I had never seen Friday the 13th on like Blu-ray or high def, or insert whatever one this is. I know if I call this high def, someone's gonna be like, educate yourself on, that's actually 1080 Magnum PI, whatever the fuck this is. I had not seen Friday the 13th in high def. And not that it's a bad thing, but like on that scene with Kevin Bacon, you can see his tan and then the light latex below. And it just made me realize, oh, that's why I don't buy Blu-ray. I mean, I do Blu-rays do kind of show the flaws in the seams more. But I guess it made me appreciate low quality DVD and even VHS quality even more. I mean, I'm glad I had these on Blu-ray. I guess I don't know where I was going with that. I guess for someone like me who's not a stickler for 4K, ultra high def, feel around and everything, it was kind of jarring to see a lot of these effects in high def for the first time. Which, my copy of Nightmare in the Damaged Brain, which is like VHS quality, they talk about in this, and it was kind of like, wow, that is super clear. But I've been going on for like 20 minutes, and I will say, as far as horror documentaries go, especially specifically 80s, this is like Godfather 2. I mean, it took everything from this, and it took it a step ahead. I mean, it goes more obscure, more intimate interviews, more obscure segments. Like with this, there was none on foreign or Italian horror films. So with this, they have a whole segment on it, and they incorporate them into the years and the overall documentary. If there's a part 3, I will get part 3. Absolutely. I like how if there was a sequel to what they talked about in this, they threw the sequel in this. There was also people that we didn't have a lot of interviews with, but it was great to see them. Of course, like Jeffrey Combs, Herbert West, Keith David, so many people I can't even remember. They even had Joe Dante kind of talking about all the Gremlins knockoffs, because they talked about Ghoulies. So Joe Dante is like, there was Ghoulies, then there was Munchies, and there was Hobgoblins and Critters. And also, the second half of the documentary, like after 1985, it really seems like it was growing with the decade, because there's a lot of comedy in this as well. They even talk about Beetlejuice, which Beetlejuice is... he is on the cover. Of course, that's a comedy, but with horror elements. There's even a segment on that about how comedy was so rich in 80s horror, and really the only decade to get it right. They go in depth with that, which I think is excellent. Movies like Reanimator, Fright Night, Return of the Living Dead, or Gremlins, or even just comedies like Beetlejuice, or what's that one, Transylvania 65000, Saturday the 14th, which was earlier 80s, or like the Little Shop of Horrors musical comedy with a Rick Moranis. They talk about all these comedies in this as well, and a segment on comedy in horror in the 80s. So, I mean, it really seems like they covered everything they did in this with the same amount of time and attention to detail and care. Honestly, if there's a part 3, I can think of movies that wasn't in either one of these that they could talk about, but those other like broad segments of tropes or signatures or whole things, I really don't know what they could talk about. I mean, but if there's a part 3, you better believe I will be getting part 3. And with this, I actually had a friend of mine order 2 copies so that I could get one. So unfortunately, I didn't get my name in the credits in this, but I did in this. And even though there's like hundreds, maybe thousands of people that bought this and got to have their name in the credits, it is as easy as buying a copy. It felt pretty cool to see. Felt pretty cool to see your name in the credits on this. But so yeah, I know I could have got the a digital copy around November This came very late December, I think. But yeah, it's probably going to be on Shudder at some point, which I think people who did get a copy will be able to see it. I know I sound like shit. Don't need to comment about it. But I loved it. I had just as much, if not more, fun and definitely more information than in this, at least for me personally, because it went more obscure. So, I mean, if they do a part 3, it's probably going to be even more obscure with more sequels and more foreign films, or maybe more foreign films from other areas. But I loved it. So, huge thanks and shout out to CreatorVC, 80shorrordoc.com, a Robin Block production. Excuse me. You guys, I mean, if you have enough material, definitely do a part 3. I will definitely get it. I loved this. I loved this. I mean, you guys definitely went above and beyond, even with just the standard copy. Like, not even the special editions, but... So, yeah. I loved it. If there's a way, for those that didn't order a copy, check your streaming services to see if they have it, or, I mean, if anyone bought it just to sell on eBay or whatever, check that. But definitely find a way to watch it. And if they do a part 3, just like they did this, 10 extra bucks, get this physical copy. If there's a way that you can do part 3 and get all 3 physical copies, it is worth it. This has been the most fun and educational that I've had watching horror documentaries. It is made by people who love horror, appreciate horror, and have made horror. I loved it. I can't say it enough, but yeah, if I say anything more, it's just sharing the information that you'll find in here, and I don't want to do that. I want people to see it for themselves and enjoy it. So, CreatorVC, you guys had another home run with this. Thank you so much. And to you all, thank you for watching.